fuck is a folk punk? A friend once asked me. This proved to be a difficult question to answer. 3 years ago, I made a short documentary about the life of a close friend for a class project starring traveling musician Benny Peak, partially in order to answer this question. My name is Alex Nathans. I grew up in a small town of Newark, Ohio, surrounded by close friends who fell in love with folk punk. Not having been much of a songwriter myself, I nevertheless grew to love the genre. Ramshackle Glory, Mischief Brew, Ghost Mice, and other bands found their way into my waking affections, and I supported friends who threw themselves at the music brought about by this strange and intriguing subculture. The small-town music scene drew heavily from folk punk as a whole, as it took a new shape, and I've had the privilege of at least being on the sidelines of this metamorphosis. Now, as the years have passed, some have adopted the opinion that folk punk has begun to make its way out of the hearts of those who once found a vibrant place of belonging and expression within its influence. We have all felt the winds change, and some feel folk punk has begun to burn out. I've set out to explore if this is true, feeling that the genre, if it truly is dying, deserves an elegy.
Magazines, windows locked up and hidden from the street in a crawl space. Forgotten money, people tensing and waiting to come back home. You can feel the tension in the house the moment you walk through the door. Seven madness, allow me in again when the first train flies past the house. Miles away, the screaming starts and it feels like a minefield. Behind that door, don't let anybody catch you. Turning the handle, it's a long, long night. It's going to be an awful and lonely night.
This is an elegy, not because the drawn conclusion is already that folk punk is dead, but it's an elegy in that this is a serious reflection on where folk punk has been, what it looks like now, and whether it has a future. So what the fuck is folk punk? From anarcho-hellraisers to buskers, prison abolition to basement shows, storytelling, acoustic instrumentation, and gut-wrenching lyrical yammerings of liberation, folk punk found its power in the connections made between people. The grassroots nature of the genre has allowed for deep expression and honesty that coaxes the seeming societal voiceless individuals out of the woodwork to find a voice and enjoy the togetherness humanity has shown a pattern of craving. I will preface everything that is to come next with saying that the DIY music scene itself is more vibrant than ever at this point in time. With the advent of technology, DIY production is alive and well. This includes Columbus and Newark, Ohio.
DIY music as a whole, that can be DIY rap, that can be DIY metal, that can be DIY pop, DIY folk, whatever, is growing because it is so much easier for me to get a snowball mic, go into my closet, and record anything I want and put it out on the internet for people to buy or consume.
The question does remain, however, how big a role does folk punk, as it was, still have in its future? That's what we're going to tackle.
Come sit down, we're lamenting about yesterday's sad ending, about the water in me whiskey. The brass passed off as gold, another round. We're descending into old of a day when wood was wooden, silver, gold was gold, sweet home was home.
So when I was like in my teens, I guess in middle school, what I listened to a lot was, that was when I started delving from, your mainstream radio stuff into more like older punk music, from Sex Pistols, Ramones, punk through the ages, whether it be Minor Threat, Black Flag. It had so much angst to it, so much energy, so much just that raw, high energy rock and roll to it. What I ended up drawn to was the lyrical content of, struggles and intrapersonal relationships. And that's something that's always been a very strong draw for me to punk music. When I originally found folk punk was probably Against Me. Against Me would probably be the first folk punk band that I ever found. And that was thanks to when I was in a band with some friends in high school. Never heard of them before, and I fell in love after Pints of Guinness. All that lyrically had more content to me than everything that was coming out mainstream. And that's why I felt that draw to it. Because it was more relatable, more honest than that facade of celebrity. This is money, this is what you want, this is what you want to be. Because I never wanted that.
Well, I just was like going through his iPod, and I remember listening to American Football for the first time, which is one of my favorite bands now. Defiance, Ohio, The Tallest Man on Earth, Flogging Molly, Dropkick Murphys, which when people say folk punk, they go, oh, you mean like Flogging Molly? It's like, no, Andrew Jackson Jihad, Mischief Brew, Pat the Bunny.
Through middle and early high school, I was really into like alternative rock and some indie stuff, like Cake and Modest Mouse were like my two jammers in middle school and high school. The first folk punk song I ever heard was Brave as a Noun by AJJ. And that's off what's probably one of their folkiest albums. And I was like, and I hadn't really been into punk at all or anything, so I was like, holy shit, this is fucking cool. They're really passionate about what they're doing, and they're not getting bogged down by being like super overtly technical. Remember going to see Neutral Milk Hotel, Ramshackle Glory, and Wingnut Dishwashers Union. Still haven't gotten around to Johnny Hobo. Yeah, I like Defiance, Ohio, Not Half Bad, Human Kitten.
I originally got into folk punk via one band, Andrew Jackson Jihad. And so at first I was like, what the fuck is this, and why did anyone make this? I was like, this sucks, coming from like metalcore and scene kid music. I was used to the refined, mastered stuff. Really from there, I think it kind of evolved via the phenomena of internet music through YouTube, just going on little like YouTube tunnels into the netherworlds of folk punk.
I was at college, I think, and I was with my girlfriend, and I think we were fighting, and I just put my headphones in because I didn't want to hear about it. I didn't want to fight with her. And I was going to YouTube because I was trying to find more music, and I saw like Andrew Jackson Jihad, Knife Man, full album on there, and I was like, what kind of fucking name is that? I was like, that's cool. That's a weird name for a band. Michael Jordan of Drunk Driving started playing, and I was like, this is like such a good song. I was like, that's such a cool idea for a song.
Jordan of Drunk Driving played his final game tonight.
The Gift of the Magi 2 came on next, and I hated it. It was like the worst song I've ever heard. I was like, this is terrible. Why? What happened? I didn't understand. And it took me like a couple other listens to like get into it, but I really started to dig it because they just had some lyrics that were sweet that I thought were really cool. I think in one of their songs, they say, fuck God anyways, God is obsolete. And I was like, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard. My God thinks my jokes are funny. That's just so cool.
So fuck God anyway, God is obsolete. Oh my God thinks my jokes are funny.
Ghost Mice, because they had that split. Pat the Bunny, and sort of into everything else.
Constant chatter reminds me why I'd rather you leave me be. So call me antisocial, call it masturbation. Either way, it's a solo operation. I'm just far more comfortable.
Let's look at the history of folk punk for the sake of good scholarship. There isn't much, but here you go.
The world would be so much better off without us.
Folk music has always been music of the people. That's what it means. And, that can be variously described as whether you want to consider bluegrass folk music. You know, you've got country as folk music to some people. You've got Pete Seeger and stuff like that as folk music to some people. To me, folk music has always been it's the voice of the people. It's the voice of those people that don't have a voice normally. The people that have things that they want to express, so they apply that through music. I'm sure there's an actual timeline that Wikipedia has gone into full length of the history of folk punk.
According to Wikipedia, like the first folk punk thing you could think of was this, can't remember his name, Patrick Fitzgerald, I think was his name, in like 77, which was like a year after the Sex Pistols and Anarchy in the UK, had this acoustic punk song. There's that back in the 70s, and then like through the 80s and 90s, you had like the Pogues, I think that's how you pronounce them, and Chumbawamba, if that's how you pronounce them, and the Violent Femmes in the 90s.
I knew the Violent Femmes, and I know the Pogues, which apparently, to Wikipedia, is like one of the bands that kind of started bringing it up, and they came out like 30 years ago, I think. 30-some years ago, which is wild to think about.
I know we wouldn't be anything, like, musically without the roots that we had.
That's not really super relevant to us. That's like ancestry stuff. Like, I don't think a lot of, I could be wrong, I don't think a lot of contemporary folk punk musicians are drawing influence from the Violent Femmes. In 1994, Planet X Records started, which was like the, as far as I know, they pretty much galvanized the whole shit.
Surely folk punk bands and artists existed before Planet X, playing music with the folk punk sound and lyrical content, indicating that much of the pre-Planet X music is not well documented. That being said, it must have been at least somewhat prominent beforehand, but it was Planet X that gave folk punk the spark of unification that placed the genre a little closer to the public eye.
They did AJJ, they did Ghost Mice, a lot of really important people, and it was really DIY localized. I mean, their slogan was, if it ain't cheap, it ain't punk, and I think they wouldn't sell CDs for over like $5. It was all mail order, and they pretty much only published bands that they knew locally, that they had like met either touring.
Bigger bands like AJJ and World Inferno Friendship Society and This Bike is a Pipe Bomb and stuff like those bands, like these big names in folk punk, are all kind of centered around one record label.
And they helped bring a bunch of bands kind of out of like the underground scene, right? It's not underground, but it's not mainstream. I don't know what you would even call it. I'm floundering over here to try and think of a word for it.
Marginalized.
Yeah. It's just for specialized taste. Without Planet X, I don't think any of it would have been really nearly like as big as it is now.
It seems the roots of folk punk are somewhat hazy, but there are artists that have made the music more accessible and have greatly influenced the genre as a whole.
Pat the Bunny, definitely Laura Jane Grace. People like that have propelled the genre and kept it going.
Johnny Hobo and the Trains, Ramshackle Glory, Pat the Bunny, like AJJ, Harley Poe, all of them kind of started the scene into a bigger focus, I'd say.
Put simply, Pat the Bunny is the artist that attracted an incredible wave of people to folk punk. I myself fell in love with the song, Your Heart is a Muscle the Size of Your Fist, eventually leading to this project years down the line. Recently, Pat dismantled his most recent band, Ramshackle Glory, leaving many people sad, but still sympathetically satisfied after a 10-year run.
And then Pat the Bunny swoops in. Somebody said I looked like him, and then showed me his music. And it was this solo-y banjo stuff, but then I looked into it on my own, and I found, fuck shit up. And I showed it to my brother, and he's like, this is like Kevin Devine if Kevin Devine just took steroids and lived in a dumpster and ate rats. This is awesome.
Live the dream, die the nightmare. Almost, at least a weekly, I listened to that album.
He sang about recovery. Addicts had a voice, and a deeply passionate one. These are fight songs about recovery and hope. But I understand he just got a full-time job as an IT and decided I'm not an anarchist anymore, and I'm not going to sing about 40s and pissing on people anymore.
We're all presidents, we're all congressmen, we're all cops, and obscure kind of perfection.
In 2011, Against Me released their album White Crosses, where the anarcho-folk punk hero, Laura Jane Grace, asked the listener, I remember the confusion among my friends back in Newark. I was a teenage anarchist? What happened? It was interpreted by many as a departure from the punk and anarchy that often goes hand in hand. But this was not what Laura Jane Grace meant when she said the revolution was a lie in the song. She's quoted saying, "The real revolution was the political awakening, that initial spark that made me want to change the world. And that's what I'm interested in, maintaining that fire." This was commentary and critique on the mentality that the ideal of anarchy was simply an outlet for angry kids to break and burn stuff, as opposed to an answer for people craving change. Nevertheless, various interpretations of the song sent tremors into the folk punk community, and caused people to compare the statement with Laura Jane Grace's changing musical style. The last example we'll look at is a sad one. Eric Peterson, singer and songwriter of Mischief Brew, possessing an incredible and influential following in folk punk, recently passed away on July 14th, 2016.
I met the guy in Cincinnati, and he greets me like, "It was an honor playing with you." And I'm like, "It was an honor playing with you." We both said it at the same time and kind of gushed for a second, and then he had to go. And then I come back to Philadelphia, and there's that flash. He's like, "Oh, hey, nice to meet you, Benny." And he was like, "Extra nice to see. It's good to see you again, man." Like, just so sincere. We're both a satisfied bunch of savvy characters, and we're here to fucking play what we got. And there's no time to be wasted.
You know, when we lost Eric Peterson from Mischief Brew to an overdose, that was a brilliant mind, a great artist, a great musician.
We should pour one out for Eric Peterson tonight. That was a heavy blow. That was the one where we all felt a loss. And it's not the kind where it's like following the trend of rock stars passing away and figureheads. We just go, "Oh, damn, another one." It's like we lost a part of ourselves a little bit. Eric Peterson was the reason I picked up a guitar and started yelling. You know, the first song I learned to cover that wasn't a Kevin Devine or Elliott Smith song was fucking Roll Me Through the Gates of Hell. That's the one that gave me my platform. You know, at open mics and stuff. That's when I realized this shit was cool.
Taking all this into consideration, the question stands, after losses, changes, and deviations from how folk punk looked 10 years ago. What has been the effect on the folk punk scene, especially at a local level?
I think it's troublesome right now, just because we've lost all these big names. I don't know, at least for me personally, like, I probably wouldn't even know about folk punk if it wasn't for AJJ, and I think, I mean, they're like, them and Pat the Bunny are like the biggest name and what used to be Ghost Mice before the shit went down were like the most name dropped in terms of like people talking about folk punk. And now I think that's definitely splintering a little bit because Pat's gone, Ghost Mice pulled that shit.
Recently, Chris Clavin, pioneer of Planet X Records, has been accused of sexual assault. This has caused many bands associated with the label to detach themselves from the label itself.
Last time I checked Planet X Records, their website's down. I think they're just dead.
We're not gonna hear from Ghost Mice anymore. I never liked that free pizza for life shit either. Like, who the hell has the time to listen to 90 songs about smoothies? I don't. I enjoy the smoothie. And then I go listen to Caliphone. I listen to a man of true grit singing about his shed collapsing and having to kill his dog.
All the folk punk that I've heard since discovering those kind of like genre archetype bands has been in the basements of like House with No Name or 15th.
But I mean, at the same time, that's like what folk punk should be, right? Like, it shouldn't be any sort of idol worship or anything.
I haven't seen a lot of local folk punk.
Now it's getting to the point, because it's turning more cloistered, I think it's going to be a tighter community because of it. And especially given to, like, this the fucking American political climate. You know, I mean, there was shit to be pissed off at, like, before, you know, but, like, ooh, now it's real cognizant. As a mode of political change, that's still what anarchism and the folk punk elements that are influenced by it, that's still their model of change, is changing people.
But we're coming to a day and age where we're becoming more aware of social issues and I guess safety for certain groups of people, whether that be people of color, trans, gay, the LGBT community. We're coming to an awareness of, you know, these are people that are in our community and we need to take more care of them. We need to provide them with, you know, the safety that we ourselves have. As a cis white male, I'm not threatened by fucking anybody.
You know, and we're starting to get some higher profile female artists, which I'm really glad to see. I think the space is already one of the more inclusive punk scenes right now. Man, and you can be inclusive and still be largely white and male, right? Just because you have the potential to welcome in people doesn't mean you're necessarily going to have those people, especially if you're not, like, actively helping, like, promoting them. And I mean, and it's a fine line, so you don't want to treat anyone like a token, you know, but you want to be welcoming and you want to promote, you know, all fucking voices, especially disprivileged ones.
Your own self-loathing, you can build you and sell it again. We're all growing cancers, the shit we put in our heads. So fuck me, fuck you, fuck off, and internalize the end of days. I swear we're atomized and we gotta find each other. The music isn't enough because we're strong.
I know there's got to be more people here in Columbus, but as far as I know right now, the only people I know who are pretty decent, like decently high visibility, are us and Montauk.
It's unconsciousness, and now it's expected to be a better man than you.
I don't even know if I count as folk punk really either, because I just when the magazine like talked about they reviewed my EP and they said, if you like early 2000s acoustic emo, this is for you. I don't even know if that counts as folk punk or not, but I guess anything does. There's not a lot of involvement. There's a lot in the DIY scene, but I think if you call them folk punk, they'd almost want to like tell you why they're not.
There's a lot of bands that get that label of folk punk that don't even necessarily label themselves that. I think that's one of the things in punk. You know, if you label yourself punk, you're not punk.
I think when you look at a punk scene from the outside, it's like, yo, these people, like, they're just fucking hooligans. And, you know, and I grew up in Puritan, Georgia, and that was my first impression, I think, at some level of a lot of the stuff in the back of my mind.
I think folk punk might be pretty damn close to that butt of every joke, if they can. I don't know. It seems like folk punk is kind of like the nerd in high school, and, like, every other genre is the bully. I think people don't like to be called folk punk because of how ugly folk punk can sound to some people. But I don't think they know like how close they are to actually sounding like they're folk punk. If you're indie and you're alternative and you're emo, you might be a lot closer than you think. Even AJJ nowadays won't even say they are. I don't think they ever did to begin with. I think other people called them that. They call themselves, I think it's trash pop now.
Trash pop?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, or garbage pop.
Yeah, I'm going to play DIY, and that's what I want to do with my life, because I personally find that, you know, because I don't want to conform to some fucking standard of musicality, and also because I personally find it more fun. I mean, that's kind of at least a lowercase p political statement, I think.
It goes without saying that folk punk is not a popular genre. But it is interesting that it has its own stigma in music circles, developing after some time of existing in the visible spotlight. So, the present state of folk punk, as a whole, is up for some debate.
I feel the state of folk punk right now isn't necessarily dwindling or dying. I just feel as though it doesn't get as much direct attention as some scenes do.
It's almost its own worst enemy, because the whole ethic is that we're not about trying to like become famous.
I think in terms of the ability for people to make, like, the rise of technology and the internet and Bandcamp and the fact that you can record an album on your phone now, if that's how you want to roll it, you can buy a cheap Blue Yeti for pretty cheap. You don't even have to go into a studio to do it. I think that has been and continues to bring more people in because it gives people the resources to do it. The barrier to entry, so to speak, is even lower than it was before, which, I mean, when you're talking this kind of music, is absolutely phenomenal. It's where it should be. I think the problem, potentially, is that you reach such a mass that, like, there's no real solidarity between people because you just can't keep track of the whole thing. And I think there's a little bit of that. It's easier to network with people, and you can go into, you know, if you're a traveling band, you can go to, like, the DIY page of the town you're going in. Yo, I play folk punk. Can I, like, sleep on someone's couch and play at a venue?
I think overall, as far as technology goes, it also kind of isolates people from that as well, because they can just listen to it in their house or on their phone or whatever now. So they don't necessarily have to seek it out. There's no adventure to having to go find, like, that one, like, guitar acoustic show that your friend's older brother's putting on in someone else's basement, and you can get beer for, like, free and shit. Like, there's no, like, whimsical, like, old school, like, punk house shit about it.
Most major cities have at least, like, one or two folk punk acts. And, you know, I don't think we'd know that if it wasn't for people posting that on the internet, and, like, there's a database now.
Days and Days had so much success through Bandcamp and SoundCloud, and just blasted off the scene, being able to book shows and go around the country to these places where people had heard of them only from the internet. As a musician from a little podunk town in, you know, Licking County, I can go to Columbus and play open mics and play songs by these people and still have them recognized by members in the audience. Like, oh my god, I love that band. You know them too? So it's a connection amongst people.
Like any form of music, folk punk draws influence from the respective circumstances and places where the artist originates from.
The town itself, it's a boring town with a rustic, rich, industrial history. You still have a lot of blue-collar kids living there and everything, and folk punk is a very blue-collar form of music, if you ask me. Any kid could just pick up a guitar, learn a few notes, and start screaming at the top of their lungs and make beautiful music.
You can get to a show for $15 instead of having to pay exorbitant amount of money for a ticket. You know, you can just walk in the doors and get to see up to, you know, a couple bands for a few bucks.
Because the fan base tends to be working class kids and adults, the low cost of shows and band logistics are kept low. As mentioned earlier, if it ain't cheap, it ain't punk.
It's hard to make money in music. It's hard to make money in music, especially music that only a very few amount of people even listen to. And, you know, you can say you're not in it for the money all you want, but at some point, you need to pay your bills.
Do they keep making music even though not a lot of people are listening? Or do they just stop? Because it's like, it hurts trying to make music.
I've seen, like, these punk houses and stuff where people play shows, they have to close down because they can't afford to, like, put on these shows anymore. Whether it be through, you know, incident or through basic monetary needs, you know. And that does close down a lot of the smaller venues to local musicians in big cities. I mean, here in Newark, we've never had much of a scene. The only places to play have been like Tony's or other local bars. You can go out and do an open mic. There used to be some coffee shops around here. Twilight. I mean, I used to play that all the time when I was a kid.
We were younger, we'd come out and play music and
have an open mic at this little place when it used to be a coffee shop, and this is where we spent the better time of our days back then. Just out here playing music and playing for whoever passed, for us.
This piece of sidewalk right here is where it all began. And now it's a popcorn shop. There's something poetic and ironic about it, but I got nothing. It just sucks.
We've gotten a few new venues, such as 31 West, and the bootlegger bar that they have there. They'll have open mics occasionally for local musicians.
The whole essence of folk punk, this DIY form of music, is that you can have a dishwashing job at, your local diner or whatever, and still be a traveling musician. That's fucking sweet. But that only goes for so long until you drive yourself mad and you're like, okay, well, maybe I want to pursue something else.
There's a reason the taxpayers take like 5 years off between album releases. It's because you can't keep person first, artist second. Take the sidecar sometimes. Sometimes it's just better to take a passive role. Let the art run off of you as you live.
We all grow older. We all eventually either, I guess, get out of that phase of thinking with folk punk, or it envelops us and becomes almost like a character. It's part of who I am as a person.
So we'll just have like a man-to-man discussion about where we should be going. And that's cool. Oftentimes that ends with, let's get a real job in trade school and not be broke all the time.
I feel, though, a lot of the changing of the scene, the reshaping of it, has somewhat pushed some of us in different directions.
We're not Tom Petty. We're not big business, high echelons, high status performers. Not all of us. Maybe we could be. That depends on your disciplines. That depends on your personhood. But I don't live and die by the DIY ethos. I like the accessibility, and I utilize it as a utilitarian, working-class young man. I can't see myself living and dying for this.
Cracked out bells and washed out horns, they sounded till my face was sworn. That's not the way, I wasn't born to lose you. I want you, I want you, I want you so bad. Honey, I want you.
Time, the weight of responsibility, survival, and just plain burnout have repelled artists from folk punk. Likewise, the fan base seems to have suffered as well. Is folk punk still alive on a global or countrywide scale?
Interrupt me drinking from my broken cup and ask for me to open up the gate for you.
You have your top 40 artists like 21 Pilots who come through. They're Ohio based. When they come through here, the whole town lights up. People are excited to go see them.
I just couldn't see that happening as easily with folk punk. Because that's just not what folk punk is.
I don't exactly think that you could have a sold-out show for days and days or Pat necessarily, but that place, every venue I've seen a folk punk artist, has been packed to the gills with people who are devout fans and wouldn't trade anything in the world to be anywhere else that night.
When a big band comes to play the living room floor at the local taco shop, all the locals get drawn into it and they're psyched about it.
You still have these young bloods like Days and Days, like Jesse, Marissa, and then My Pizza, My World, going around, still trying to do that thing. You got the taxpayers, you've got people still thriving in that scene that won't give up, that keep doing what they love, and that's really what it's going to take to reshape and rebuild.
Shoot dope till the money's all spent. How long will it be before we walk into the detox center again? The monkey I want off my back is everywhere I run. So there's a way out, there's a way out, there's a way out, but it's not on our own. There's a way out, there's a way out, there's a way out, but...
We're now coming to the end of the Elegy. Folk punk has always been average people singing fight songs for and against the world. But what about the future? Does folk punk even have a future in the world we inhabit and share?
When you see that lacking of I guess, new from the things that you loved, at some point, it's like an obligation to at least attempt to create something on that scale.
I think what's happening in folk punk right now is it's you're going from folk punk into emo. They're both very emotional genres of music.
Not that folk punk has to be literal folk influence. A lot of it isn't, which is freaking fine.
Music is an ever-growing, ever-changing thing, especially in that independent folk punk scene.
Because we're not trying to, have like a central program and you got to do this to be folk punk. It's pretty loose.
And I know that you hate me. You got every damn God-given right.
I think folk punk is kind of like the place where you can make it whatever you want it to be. Like, for me, I'm emo, acoustic, folk punk, right? Moderately Attractive is like anti-fascism folk punk. There's no set sound. It's not, rock. It's not country. It's not rap. It's got its own, like, wide blanket that it's allowed to have in terms of noise.
You can be simultaneously really vulnerable and really confrontational at the same time, which I don't think you can do everywhere.
You also want to, I think, put that out there in a medium that's going to be listened to. Because what's the point of, like, screaming if you're just, like, screaming at a wall?
This isn't a strictly musical genre. This is a community of people.
I'm all I see in my tiny little vortex, and it's all I need. Got my books and cigarettes.
I think what it's going to look like moving forward is a loose-knit community of smaller profile artists. And then still AJJ, of course. Oh, and Days and Days, because always.
I mean, if I have anything to do with it, it's gonna continue existing, it's gonna evolve, and people will hopefully respect it more and take it more seriously. So I hope it survives. I think it will. I don't know. I think it needs to evolve, and I think it is evolving, and that's what I would want from it.
I'd like to see more people involving themselves, if they're driven by that music, to create, to put their feelings out there via tape recording or music and sharing that with the world.
And if the set of artists that's in it right now is going to turn out to be the last wave, then I guess we're going down with the ship. I'm totally down to do it because it's great. May as well get it while it's going.
I'm not ready to give up on folk punk, and I know there's other people out there like me. I'm still kicking, man. And, maybe one day I'll be like old Henry Rollins punk rock grandpa. Like, just...
It's like a cockroach. I don't think it's gonna, even if nukes start falling, I don't think it's gonna go away. I think if nukes started falling, I think it'd get bigger.
Given the state of this country right now, there's gonna be some stuff popping up.
But I see every day people trying to put together shows like this. I see, small punk bands from my town touring the state. If that keeps up, I don't think folk punk will ever die. Honestly.
I believe there will always be somebody out there who is angrily thrashing away at an acoustic guitar, like a $40 acoustic guitar. Like that, I think that will always be a thing.
I don't know if a creature like that can die at this point. I think it's got too much breath in it.
If there's any punks out there listening, please keep doing you. Keep making music.
I think everyone has that one song or that one album that speaks to them. And when it comes to folk punk, I think that artist, that album, that song speaks to the part of them that wants freedom. Even though nobody can really put their finger on what that is or what the real expression of that is. I think that's what folk punk is. I think folk punk is a discussion about why freedom and the longing for it is so ingrained in the human heart. And it's a discussion on how that finds fulfillment. What's the manifestation of that freedom that we all long for? Some people think it's anarchy. Some people think it's governmental reform. Maybe it's something deeper. I think what's important is that we keep that discussion going. Because what that discussion is a refusal to ignore what's wrong with this world. It's a refusal to ignore what hurts and destroys people. And that's why folk punk can't die. That's why we can't let it die. So I've done my part. The ball's in your court.
We are painting the walls, making jokes out of laws, hiding sleeping pills under our tongues. Shut the light, close the door, we spit them to the floor, and we're humming and strumming and singing on drums. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Slumber by you, we will not be lulled into sleep. For we've had a taste of this wondrous place and its treasures we intend to keep. We will not be lulled into slumber, we will not be lulled into sleep. For we've had a taste of this wondrous place and its treasures we intend to keep. For we've had a taste of this wondrous place and its treasures we intend to keep. So now when they say we just waste away, you can say, hey, it's not so. Why is it then that we're growing and growing and growing and growing and showing them all what we know? Yeah, 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 yeah. We will not be lulled into slumber by you. For we've had a taste of this wondrous place. La 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 la. We will not be lulled into sleep. For we've had a taste of this wondrous place and its treasures we intend to keep. For we've had a taste of this wondrous place and its treasures we intend to keep.
Fuck Nicolas Cage. I'm sorry. I don't know how you feel about Nicolas Cage, but fuck Nicolas Cage.
I think he's really good at being Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, he can't be anything else.
Right, and I think no one else can do quite what he does. I'm not saying it's like technically proficient or always what I'm in the mood for, but I don't know. Sometimes Nicolas Cage freaking out is just, it really hits the spot. Sometimes.
Wicker Man.
Wicker Man.